Hey, everybody. Welcome to the morning market briefing. It's Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026. Hope you're doing well out there. Lots to talk about. We are going to get to earnings and what we're seeing in the economy in just a little bit, but we will open up with a number of geopolitical stories, most notably the war. Diplomacy seems to be taking a backseat to rising tensions here at this point. U.S. widening the scope of their airstrikes. The Iranian government saying, hey, our new message is that the enemy violated the memorandum and should implement it, which is always a great thing to say after you throw the first punch and then say they started it.
After you violated the memorandum.
Yeah. It just seems like we're moving in the wrong direction in terms of a resolution of this through diplomacy.
Yeah, I've been hearing Two-Way has been talking about it, not thinking that this might happen, but we've seen more noise about ground forces as well, not necessarily from the U.S., but expeditionary forces from Israel. Concerned that it could blow up some of the Abraham Accords, and we'll see what happens. But I don't think we're going in the right direction with Iran. If you want peace, I think we're getting. I don't know what the end game is here.
Yeah, it's tough to discern because, I mean, we said it when the memorandum of understanding was announced. It felt like a little bit of a nothing burger that was not going to have a meaningful impact. This entire conflict, we've doubted the ability to reach a true diplomatic solution, both from the perspective of the counterparty as well as the fact of getting terms that were actually agreeable and would be considered a success for the U.S. Tom, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
You know, some cancers respond well to radiation. Yeah, I think that's something we should consider. I think this is really a modern problem, and I think that if we wanted to win the war in Iran, we could do it, and we could be done in a week, even with ground forces. I think you go door to door and either arrest or execute every military-aged man across that country, and I think we have the military might to do it. And the war will be over. And if you go back through the history of time, that's how you would do it. You know, Ben and I were talking about it earlier. It's like when the Blitzkrieg started, Belgium and Poland fell in a day. You know, one day you were Belgian, the next day you were not. And that's how, and they, of course, rolled out with their horses and their spiked helmets. And they were like, we're going to fight, the onslaught. And they couldn't because they were militarily incapable of doing so. But we live in a world of no cruelty. You can't judge anybody. You can't do anything that's remotely mean. You have to let them fire upon you and run into your camp with a explosive vest before you can do anything. And I think we've hamstrung ourselves. It's like I could blindfold myself and try and do a Rubik's Cube.
Do it.
But it would take me a really long time, and I would fail a lot, and I would probably starve to death before I got anywhere. Or I could use ChatGPT and take a picture of it and say, I have all this technology and this capability. How do I solve this Rubik's Cube? And I could be done in 5 minutes. But we're choosing to blindfold ourselves. So that's where I'm at on this. I still think, and I would love to hear your thoughts. I maintain that we would have been better off if we had just bombed them and destroyed all their infrastructure like we threatened to now 60 days ago, 75 days ago.
Yeah, I continue to have a concern that we end up at that path, and it could have been taken much earlier.
Yeah. And they've had plenty of time to prepare.
Yeah.
And look for new ways to choke off the Strait of Hormuz and sow subterfuge through the media, over the last period of time.
Yeah, 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's like we have no backup here. Our biggest allies historically are all beholden to our enemies. France, UK, Germany, all are terrified of their newfound citizens that don't want anyone to go to war with anyone who is remotely Muslim. And so I think that's a real problem for us. I think if you're going to do it, go ahead and do it. That's my opinion on this. It's like, if you're going to start a war with somebody and you don't have any backers, if I was to start a fist fight with someone random in the crowd, it would make more sense for me to beat them until they couldn't move anymore than it would be to punch them in the face and then be like, hang on, never mind. You recover and I might punch you again.
And I think the implication is that I think we dramatically underestimated the willingness to respond and the ability to like close the strait, I think, is probably the most relevant thing. And that was a big miscalculation, because I think that if they knew about what quagmire this would result in, I don't know if they would have done it. I think they thought it was going to be a little bit more like Venezuela.
But now you know.
And now you know, and now you're in a really tough spot because you're left making a choice that you didn't think you'd have to make.
I mean, one of the reasons why I think the Don Roe doctrine stuff is actually really important is because Venezuela went the way it went because Venezuela, despite their socialist history, is more culturally similar to us than Iran. In fact, I would say they're very culturally similar to us. Regardless, I mean, it's really a political issue, not a cultural issue, and that's what people don't understand. I cannot stress that enough. It's like you think, oh, everybody's just like us. Humans are all very similar, but like
they're really not.
You could walk into a number of places and people are doing things you wouldn't even believe. Like, back in the day,
watching soccer,
it was very common for Japanese people to bind women's feet so they looked grotesque and wild, but that was considered very attractive, and now it would seem insane, but for hundreds of years that was not insane. In fact, you were insane for not doing it. So, I mean, it's the cultural differences are stark. I mean, one of the reasons I believe that Japan is so on board with us is because it's illegal to have a mosque in Japan, because they're very concerned about maintaining their culture in the same way that golf is virtually illegal in China because they're very concerned about maintaining their culture, but somehow we can't seem to wrap our hands around that there are two different cultures here, and one of them is very different from us, and we can't treat them like a culture that is ours. But Venezuela, you can roll right into Venezuela, and most people are like, for the most part, we're kind of on the same board. We kind of just want law and order and people to treat each other nice and respect for women and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a high bar.
That's why locking down this hemisphere and saying, hey, we're not going to have a lot of influence from that hemisphere is a good thing, in my opinion. So that's, I'm probably taking a very hard stance that people are not on board with, but, it is what it is. I think that in war, you should certainly consider the probabilistic outcomes, and some of them are very callous, and they need to be. And that's just the fact.
What seems to have happened to me is I think there was such a rightful, aggressive push to no forever wars. Lost in all of that is most of the forever wars that we referenced weren't really fully weighed. And I'm not saying this like the correct way, so forgive me if you served in any of these wars. But it's not like we were in full frontal attack mode for the entirety of Afghanistan. It's people were in dangerous positions. A lot of people lost lives that shouldn't have been there. But I think people are confusing urgency and in deployment, whether it's boots on the ground, whatever, with a forever war. And the reality is this is one that if you want to win it, you can do it relatively quickly. And what happens next, I don't know. Does it look like a forever war? I don't know. But we're out now at a spot, in my opinion, where you either win the war decisively, and you have been winning, but it's clearly still going. You either win decisively or you say, my bad, we're just done. We're not negotiating. We're not figuring anything out, because there is not going to be a negotiation that's meaningful.
I think what markets are saying today, and oil's up again, so now we're into the mid-90s, back in the mid-90s on Brent. I think the markets are, and maybe this is one of the reasons interest rates are higher, and that is I think that markets are starting to question that premise that you just said, Andrew, that we could win this relatively quickly. I think that because of
if
the
we
fecklessness,
were willing to.
Yeah, I think that because of the fecklessness of the last 6 months and the inability to close the deal, so to speak, I think that markets are kind of saying it's kind of the same thing when Russia went into Ukraine. It's like, oh, well, Russia could easily just take out Ukraine. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe Russia's not that good at war. And I'm not saying the U.S. is not good, but I'm saying the markets are starting to question that.
I think there's and that's where I would, in some roundabout way, kind of compare this to investing, in the sense that when we talk about a client's risk tolerance, there's multiple components to that. It's not just your ability to take risk or your willingness to take risk. It's both. I think the United States has the ability to do exactly what Tom just said and, hey, spend a week and this thing's done. They clearly don't have the willingness. And if they don't have that willingness, I think they're doing the thing that is least effective.
I mean, I think that's why we had the Forever Wars, is because at first it was
they were
shock and
not
awe,
willing.
and then it was hearts and minds. We're going out and handing out crayons to little kids who then are digging holes and putting bombs next to the road in the middle of the night, you know, and that's a problem,
Yep.
you know?
I just don't know where it goes. I think we were talking about it last week. It just seems like further escalation is the likely outcome, but not escalation to a point of, oh, here's the path.
And I think again the kind of the implication for people who are not fighting in the war, so not directly involved in it, people who are listening to this call perhaps, is that it does put the U.S. in a marginally inferior position from a fiscal standpoint, and not even so much because of the money that's being spent, but because it's influencing the price of oil, which is influencing interest rates. We might have interest rates that are 100 or 200 basis points higher than they should be, which on a debt of $40 trillion
matters a lot.
Is $800 billion a year. Mm-hmm. So that's the implication that we have to contend with when we're thinking about things that influence inflation and interest rates.
Kind of around the corner, Saudi Arabia getting a nuclear enrichment deal approved. It's a 30-year deal that would open the door to uranium enrichment for civilian nuclear power. Giving U.S. companies a central role in developing the nuclear infrastructure, supposed to be submitted to Congress for review in the coming days. I don't have a good read, Ben, on congressional approval on something like this. Do you think it's going to be, like everything else, a party line fight? Or
I might be reading way too much into this. First of all, we all know Saudi Arabia doesn't need the energy.
Yeah.
I almost wonder, I think this is why now is the question that I'm asking. And I think the why now is the same reason that Trump came out and said, we're going to do 20% tolling on the ships coming out of Hormuz. It's like, this is the model that Iran can follow. Okay, so we set the 20% number. Now we can negotiate down to 3%. We split it with Iran. This is the model if you want nuclear enrichment.
Yeah, look how easy this was.
We're going to come in with U.S. companies who are going to do the construction and monitor, and then you can have your nuclear. And I wonder if that's the angle they're going with, because Saudi Arabia doesn't need the energy any more than Iran needs the energy.
Yeah.
Argentina, Tom, getting a nice little raise from Moody's in terms of their debt rating.
I mean, I think it's certainly not really in our wheelhouse for clients, just because it's just not a good suitability matchup. But I think that the Argentinian 10-year is interesting, and notably, it was even more interesting 2-3 years ago when Javier Milei really stepped in, because at that point you were looking at high double-digit yields on their 10-year, you know, in the 20 to 23% range, and now they're actually a little bit cheaper than when we talked about them yesterday, even though they've been upgraded at about 8.80 on the 10-year. But I think it's an interesting story where you have a country that's really turning itself around from an economic standpoint, who has, you know, a business culture, a ton of natural resources, and someone at the helm who is just ready to cut spending and turn that country around. And we've seen that reflected in their debt rating now. We've seen it reflected in the yields on their long-term debt. And I think that, I mean, it's interesting. It certainly couldn't be a very large part of portfolios, and I mean, I don't generally think it's suitable for most clients, but I think it's a really interesting play. I think that Latin America, particularly parts of South America, are suddenly going to be much more economically valuable, particularly on the debt side. And maybe the move is to look into some sort of fund-based vehicle where you've got a little more liquidity, maybe a
like
closed-end
an
fund
or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. I think Argentinian debt is very interesting, and I think it bodes well for all of the haters and losers who said that, you know, Milei was going to destroy Argentina immediately and that he was not going to be able to handle inflation. He seems to have done that pretty quickly and pretty effectively, and they're really on the road to stability for the first time in their history, really, despite losing the World Cup.
Tough times. UK inflation down to a 15-month low, coming in at 2.6. Previously it was at 2.8. What's the path? Will they cut rates? And if not, why won't they?
It doesn't seem like they're going to cut rates. They have a new prime minister in there, but I think they could really be helped by it because, I mean, more than the U.S., British mortgages float to the prevailing rate, which right now is at 3.75. So there's gonna be a spread on top of that, and cutting that rate to 2.5 or 2 would provide a meaningful boost to the British economy. On top of that, they have a supply issue on housing, but I don't know if the new prime minister is on board with that, and I think he has other priorities.
Trump rolling out 100%, or threatening at least 100% tariffs on generic drugs coming in internationally, starting in August of 2028. Shots fired at Teva, notably an Israeli
Yeah,
company.
my question is this a way of trying to rein in Israel?
Yeah.
I was thinking that exact same thing. Again, you asked the question, why now? I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to release this until August 2028, and yet you're saying you're hitting Teva right now at this time. It's interesting.
If you're a consumer out there, how does this impact you?
Well,
I would presume not nearly to the impact that people think the tariff will, which has been the case on pretty much everything with the tariffs have maintained.
Well, if you read the articles, what the articles are saying is that you're not going to be able to afford any drugs. It's going to spiral out of control. People are going to be getting sick and not be able to afford medication. This is not true. 100% tariff on a generic drug. These things are so cheap to make. I frankly, I don't know why the U.S. doesn't produce generic drugs anyway. I mean, they're not expensive to make. It's not like we need a lot of labor. I think that the reason that they're produced in other countries is because of tax breaks, and I think that's all there is to it. Otherwise, they could be produced here, and I think they should be.
Getting a live text call from a super user.
Here we go. Buckle up.
In reference to the GE Vernova discussion of yesterday. So the question is, out of curiosity, you're interested in purchasing the GE turbine stock, GE Vernova. Is that primarily because you think natural gas will fill the energy deficit AI is creating via utility producers like Southern Company, or because you think data centers will be allowed to become independent producers and that gas is the easiest way to do that? I agree nuclear is a dud simply because of regulations and geopolitics. Go.
I mean, I think it's both of them. I mean, I think GE, so they have capacity of going up to 30 gigawatts per year in terms of turbine production. You compare that to, that's 100 times what a SMR nuclear reactor can do. And so I think when we're looking for the next thing, I think that this is the place to be. We're looking at it. It's a little bit, it's on sale today. They just reported earnings. They upgraded guidance. They upgraded revenue numbers. Their backlog is growing like crazy. People are paying them big upfront payments, so their free cash flow is going really well. Their EBITDA margin didn't expand, and so I think that's why they're down today. EBITDA margin is critical for this company. Right now, their gross margin is like 20%, which you should not have in a manufacturing company. In a highly competitive manufacturing company, you want to be around 30%, and their EBITDA margin's 10%. So, I mean, in a lot of the street is modeling, and I would agree. If they can get to 40% gross margin and 30% EBITDA margin, this thing is going to probably quadruple earnings. And all of a sudden, instead of trading at 50 times or 70 times earnings, it's going to trade at a much more reasonable multiple. It's going to take a period of years, but I think the growth is there. The backlog is baked in. And I think this is great because I think it's going to bring down power costs for everyone, for the data centers, for the grid, and for you and me.
Boom.
Let's stick with earnings, Ben, and start with data centers, where it seems to be kind of mixed stories in terms of how people are reacting. SMCI, you mentioned a very confusing pre-announcement, but they're up 16%.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just I don't know. I don't know with this stock. I continue to think it's I I don't think there's much there, frankly, with SMCI. But they had very good gross margin. Instead of 8% expected, they are actually coming in at 15%, but their revenue's coming in on the low end of expectation. So basically what they're doing is they're just selling to people who really need their stuff, which is basically just resold NVIDIA chips. And so they're up. The big hit on SMCI is that they don't have a moat and they never going to make money on this, which I continue to have sympathy toward that view. But 15% gross margin, I guess, in some businesses is good.
Yeah, they'll take it, I guess.
And a bad company name.
Yeah.
They should be micro supercomputers, not super microcomputers.
Yes. Agreed. On the consumer side, it seems like we're continuing to see the narrative emerge in terms of really just the strength of consumers. We're seeing wages play a role there and credit quality remaining quite strong.
Yeah, we saw that at Synchrony yesterday. I think we'll see that at American Express on Friday, and we saw that at Capital One last night. They say credit continues to come in very strongly. Delinquencies in the card business was they said, quote, particularly strikingly strong. And that's the same thing we saw with Synchrony. Pulte, the home builder, actually said, we see a stabilizing housing market, even with volatile interest rates and strained affordability, which is, again, remarkable at 6.5% rates. And a lot of that's because real wages are improving. AT&T is seeing better margin growth, good subscriber additions. So overall, I think that the consumer is doing well, but I think it's still a discerning consumer. We did see the upgrade rate at AT&T for the new iPhone slow.
Yep.
From what it was last year and even what it was in Q1. So that's something to watch as Apple reports next week, I think.
Yep. Big night of earnings and a big morning tomorrow, but Alphabet tonight, ServiceNow tonight, Tesla tonight. Buckle up, everybody.
Yeah, it's finally here. We've kind of had this.
We've warmed up.
We've warmed up, and now we're in it.
Now we're hitting stoppage time, and we should start thinking about trying to score.
Yeah, what inning are we in?
Yeah,
in this cycle.
Oh man,
We need to start coming up with a metaphor where the market cycle.
It would be fun to somehow get like just a scoreboard on the call, like a little graphic where it's just like
Are we somewhere at the second water hydration break?
Every few months we update the stoppage time. And like no, the cycle's still going. So
yeah, we're retiring in 90 minutes. By the way, all of us.
Yeah.
Plus stoppage time.
Yeah, unless you get subbed out for an injury. So.
Yeah. That's a tough way to go.
Be sure and get your blood work.
It's a tough way to go when you sit at a desk all day.
Yeah.
All right, we'll wrap it up there. Y'all have a great day. We will be back tomorrow day. Talk to you soon.